I'm Dave Laird.
I'm Matt Booker.
I'm Adam Levin, and here in the Great Concavity, it's your ass, Ace.
Oh. Nice. Awesome. Well, welcome everybody to episode 53 of The Great Concavity. We are joined by very special guest, Adam Levin. Adam, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you.
Is that from Stand By Me? Is that from Stand By Me?
It's your ass, Ace?
It's your ass, Ace.
Oh,
yeah.
I never even thought of that, because that's Kiefer Sutherland's name in Stand By Me, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ace.
That's one of my favorite lines where he's like, what are you going to do, Gordy, shoot us all? He's like, no, Ace, just you.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry to interrupt the intro.
No worries.
Welcome to the show.
Thank
Adam.
you.
Yes, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, guys.
Great to have you.
Great to be here.
If you've listened to this show at all in the last 4.5 years since we've been doing it, you've no doubt heard the name Adam Levin, like probably at least 10 or 15 times. You come up a lot on the show, Adam. I'm a huge fan of your novel, The Instructions, that came out in 2010 with McSweeney's. And we are very excited to have you here today to talk about that, as well as your forthcoming novel, Bubblegum, which hits shelves on April 14th. We are recording about 3 weeks in advance of that right now. By the time this comes out, will be about that. It'll come out that week or so.
Great.
Which gives folks a chance to check it out, really shortly after this episode comes out. So we're excited to get to talk to you about that. You're also the author of a short story collection called Hot Pink, which was also out on McSweeney's, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And your writing has come out in lots of other numerous publications like The New Yorker, McSweeney's, Esquire, Playboy. You had a brand new short story called Kid Positive, came out on the March 2nd issue of The New Yorker, which also was very coolly accompanied with an audio recording of it by you narrating it, which I listened to again today. And it's really funny and smart and thoughtful. And of course, you've won a lot of awards like the New York Public Library Young Lions Fiction Award, the National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, the National Jewish Book Award finalist, and you spent a lot of your time in Chicago, and now you're currently out of Florida. So there's a little bio for everybody about who you are.
Thanks.
And maybe start by just telling us a bit about what is it about Wallace that spoke to you. Obviously, we'll get into how you've quite frequently been compared to Wallace, but maybe give us a bit of a sense of your background with him and maybe a bit of your story of becoming a novelist, and then we'll dive in after that.
All right. Well, so as far as Wallace goes, I think the first time I read him, it was Infinite Jest, and I had a friend who kind of wouldn't shut up about it. It was I think it was 1997. It had just come out in paperback. And he actually is sort of this guy's like 10 years older than me, and this pal of mine, and he actually drove me to the bookstore and bought it for me because I didn't have any money, and then it really, like, I have all this sort of romantic book you love kind of things associated with it. I remember where I was sitting, like I remember it as sort of like this like series of postures in a certain room. And it was just, I read it in, I think 4 or 5 weeks the first time, like just epically read it. That's all I did. I went to work and I read it. It was the summer.
Yeah.
And I don't know, and, looked forward to coming home to it. And I think that what spoke to me about it, in it more than anything, was just how funny it was. And obviously, like, it was maybe not obviously, but for me it was a different book than any other kind of book I'd read, and yet it seemed like it had to me, like the way I described it to myself at the time, and I think to some degree the way I still do, is it sort of seemed like it was this bringing together of J.D. Salinger and Kurt Vonnegut. Those were kind of my heroes at the time, and still Salinger certainly still is, and Vonnegut too, and it was this guy who was going to play around with form a lot, and go to wild places, and at the same time create this extremely intimate story at all times. And it's Infinite Jest is like the intimate story of 70 different people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it really is, particularly Hal and Gailey, but really at any moment you never sort of see like a sketch of a character. It is, he lets them all sort of bloom into three dimensions, and I don't know, and it blew me away, and and I liked, I think that this friend of mine, the way he kind of prepared me to read it was, and it's what I tell people when I recommend it, because people see it and they're like, oh, it's so challenging, and it has this reputation as being this horribly challenging book, like it's gonna hurt to read, like it's eating your it's your vegetables, and you just read it at the first time you read it like it's a collection of short stories that's about 70 different characters who live in the same world, and if you don't try to really track it plot wise, like according to the spy stuff, and you're naturally curious about the movie, and then otherwise you just fall into these stories of these characters and addiction and family life, and it all does end up adding up, but you don't need to be following it the way you do most novels, or the way you feel you need to follow most novels.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And then when you go back and read it again, then all the plot stuff actually starts seeming sort of not conventional, but like it's pretty there. It's fairly simple.
Yeah.
Once you take the sort of high concept of the tape of the movie, and it's I don't know. That was my experience.
Nice.
So can I ask, whenever you started writing the instructions, then did you think like, oh shit, if I keep writing in this number of pages, once I get 1,000 pages or something, people are going to compare me to people who write 1,000-page novels? How was your process like going into that experience? I assume you wrote some of the instructions in your MFA program.
I did. I wrote like the first 350 pages there, 350 or so.
And that was Syracuse?
That was Syracuse, yeah.
And George Saunders was one of your teachers there, is that right?
Yeah, he was my thesis advisor. He was.
Oh, he was. Wow, yeah. Amazing.
Yeah,
and he's got
best guy.
And he's got Saunders as your primary endorsement on the back of Bubblegum, which we'll get to a bit later.
Yeah, yeah, that was pretty sweet.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, really the nicest fucking guy. Can we just say, like, everyone, like,
no, he
if
is.
you have anyone that says something bad about Saunders, like they're lying. Like no one's ever.
They're lying, or they're mentally ill. Yeah.
Or they're the bad guy.
Or they're the devil, or he's the devil, and he's the most charming devil on earth.
He's conned every single human.
He's the Kaiser Sose of the literary world.
Yeah. No, he's great. He's such a good dude, but he's also just a phenomenal teacher. Like teaching writing is sort of usually there are some really great creative writing teachers, but there are also a lot of people who aren't really teaching anything, and he does. Like I feel like everyone who was a student of his really came away from it feeling that they had improved a lot more quickly than they would have had they not been his student, and that's the most you can ask from an art teacher.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's the real deal. He's great, and he's one of my favorite writers too.
Oh yeah, outrageous.
Yeah.
Legit. Yeah. No, my question was just basically like the big book question. Like, it used to be Infinite Justice published in a different time, Instructions published really in a different time than we're in now. Sure. And like, what's your feeling about it? Like the length of the novel versus what's expected of people to read. How do you feel about, yourself? Like we love these books. We're drawn to them because they are big novels. Sure. Like, what does that say about us? Like, is that like, tell me I'm bad? I don't know.
No, I don't think so. I'm actually not particularly drawn to large novels. I read them. I'm reading Executioner's Song right now, but I actually don't read them that frequently. And I think it's a weird thing to talk about big novels as though it's a genre, like on the one hand, and then on the other, it also does. There's a different experience that's created when you're spending more time with the book. So I don't know. I think I maybe surprisingly don't have that strong of an opinion or set of thoughts on big novels in themselves. Like I always want just I read the way I write, which is like very line to line. And so if something can blow me away for 800 pages or 1,000 pages, that's wonderful. And if it can't, then I wish it was shorter. But I could say the same thing about a 200-page novel, 300-page novel, of which plenty of them stop blowing me away after 10 pages, if they ever blew me away at all. So
I think that's fair enough. I mean, I guess I'm comparing it to like I'm walking down the street, right, and I see a store, and I can tell, like at a glance, like, am I even slightly interested in this store? I'm the same way at a bookstore, right? Like I can walk down the aisle, and just at a glance, I'm like, oh shit, this is a out of print Joseph McElroy novel that I'm gonna pick it up, like whether or not I've even read a page of it. I guess that's. There are people I think who will pick up this book and have picked up the instructions in the past because it appeals to those people who have had, sort of love affair with other longer novels.
Sure.
And, I think another thing that maybe Dave can speak to too is like the sort of different characters. Like there's definitely a main character in this book and the instructions, but there are a lot of other well-developed characters, just like you were saying in Wallace. I think that you've done a great job with bringing out a lot of other, not just characters, but like narrative strands. So that's, of the different varieties of multiple, like long novels, this one is unique in that you have those different narrative strands that are sort of, I don't know, eclectically developed. Like, I don't even know the word because like postmodern sounds so dated. Like,
I think you're looking for the term postmodern, Matt, or post
whatever's after
postmodern.
But I mean, if someone picks it up and flips it through, right, they'll see like, oh, there's an instruction manual and there's like dialogue and a student paper and like these different modes and like, I guess my question for you is like, how much of that when you're writing it is decided as you go, and like how much of that is planned?
Almost none of it's planned. I plan very little.
You don't have the crazy whiteboard with all the like red yarn connecting dots between all the as you map out.
No, what happened with the instructions, and I think to a much lesser degree with Bubblegum, because I learned my lesson, was there was a certain point in the instructions where I was really low on money, and I had like, I don't know, I think like 500 pages. And I had this agent and I was like, you got to sell this thing for me. And she said, you have to write a synopsis. Okay. And so of what's not there. And so I sat down and I wrote a synopsis that was, I think, seriously, like 80 double-spaced pages. And
Jesus.
Yeah. And then like that got like some editors interested. They read the first part of it, but no one was giving me money. Mm-hmm. And so then I was like, shit. And I would look at the synopsis and I would just like, I have such kind of like an authority problem, or maybe just like I'm bored by things that I know. And so I undermined everything in the synopsis. Like any step of the way, I would sometimes check it because you get like, I'd be like, I'm a little stuck. And I would look at my synopsis and I would be like, well, I'm not doing that shit. so it was like, so outlining is really bad for me. Like okay. I have this, it's really childish, like this sort of authority problem to the point where like, if I make a thing, it's too much authority.
Amazing.
If I have some instructions. So with Bubblegum, I kind of didn't do that. With Bubblegum though, it was weird because the first thing I wrote in it actually was the left side of the instruction manual. It was like one of the instruction manuals. Mm-hmm. And
whoa.
And so I wrote that, and I mean it's weird to even say it was the first thing I wrote. I don't know. It's weird to sort of like dig through, how a book came about. But it was like, 'cause I wrote about Belt and his father like in Syracuse. And then it kept sucking. I kept writing like short story and it sucked. And then and then whatever, I wrote a bunch of other stuff. And then when I finished like editing Hot Pink, I started looking at, like, I had some ideas about curios, what came to be the curios, and those ideas ended up being stupid. And then so I sat down and wrote this instruction manual. I guess what I mean is the instruction manual is really apart from this one piece of this scene in Bubblegum where Clyde, the father, comes back from his fishing trip, and he has this monologue about this glass of water. Apart from that, like, the instruction manual is the first thing that I wrote that ended up staying in the book. And like that part with Clyde was from like almost 20 years ago, from 17 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
So each of these books took you about a decade to write, if what I've heard is correct.
Yeah. I think so. Something like this one. This one was a little less time than the instructions. The instructions took about, I think, 9.
Right, because you had Hot Pink came out in 2012. Right?
Yeah, but that was mostly written before the instructions was finished.
Yeah.
So it was like, it's all how you count it. This was like, I think I started Bubblegum in earnest. Like, I threw aside all else, like probably 6 months after Hot Pink was published.
Okay.
And I was just like, okay, like this is what is trapping me. This is what I have to work on. And then I finished it like summer of 2017. So I think it was like 5 years of, daily earnest only Bubblegum work. And before that, probably on and off, like, 6, 7 months, 8 months. And then after it's sold, so a little more work with the revisions. So, yeah.
Cool.
Probably 7 years.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, so going back to the Wallace comparison question, Mary Carr, who everyone who listens to this is very familiar with, because it's obviously her and Wallace dated, she said about the instructions that the ghost of D.F. Wallace would relish comparisons to this brave new talent, this year's best debut by a country mile.
Yeah, that was nice.
That's a pretty nice endorsement. And so I'm curious, like, that was 10 years ago. A lot of reviews that came out about the instructions were comparing you to Wallace. And yeah, of course, the thing is like, you write a long novel, you get compared to Wallace, but like as if he was the first person to write a long novel, right? So that's kind of obviously a bit silly.
Yeah, as if Cervantes didn't exist.
Yeah, totally. Or the Russians or in 19th century. Right. Yeah. So so like I know in the Interview magazine in 2012, you were asked this question, like, do you find this flattering? What's your take on that now in 2020? I mean, there have been some kind of developments about Wallace's persona, how he's perceived, especially in certain, pockets of the internet where people are not very happy with how some of his personal life stuff shook out. Where do you sort of land with that now, 10 years later, I wonder?
I land with it where I could care less about anyone's personal life. So it's like really like, no, I mean, seriously, like I couldn't read the Russians. They all hated Jews. I mean, like, it's
the ultimate act
I don't like, I can't care about that shit. That is not how to approach art. For me, at least. And so, maybe he was a jerk. I have no idea. I've read accounts of him being a jerk. I've read accounts of him not being a jerk. I've known people who've been a student. I actually don't care. And like, I find like, and this might come from having been a fan of Salinger for so long and really enjoying the fact that Salinger hid from everything. Like that always seemed to be a great move. Because anytime you hear anything about Salinger, it's gross shit about him, drinking piss or something. I don't know. Like, no, seriously. Like, it's like, I don't know if you guys heard that stuff. I don't want to spread it.
That's true. And Joyce Maynard and all of that. But I'm sort of like relieved to hear that, because that's sort of the way that I have tried to read, especially in the past like 10 years, where there's a lot of personal shit where I'm like, I just don't even want to know what this fucking person did. And like, I really like, I read a book by Dalton Trumbo, and I'm like, I actually don't even want to read his biography. I'm like, I just want to read his work. And before I do that, anyways, I realize we've been talking about this book for like 30 minutes and we haven't a brief even told
summary
what it's about.
I was going to say we should backtrack a little bit.
I'm like, fuck, maybe we should backtrack a little bit and be like, what are we even talking about with Bubblegum? Dave, do you want to attempt a capsule summary?
I would love
of this
to.
book?
And I've got a little short portion lined up that I'd like to read, and Adam has one too. So we'll get those shortly here. But essentially, this is a book about a character named Belt Magnet, who's 37 years old, I think, and lives in Wheelatine, Illinois, which is a fictional city not far from Chicago, I think. Is that right, Adam?
Yeah, pretty much a suburb.
Okay. And Belt's a fiction writer. He wrote a book called No, Please Don't, years ago, and it kind of became a bit of a cult thing, but most people haven't heard of it or read it. And the universe that you've created here, Adam, which this didn't occur to me until someone mentioned it, and I was maybe halfway through the book, is that it's an internetless world. Like it's like an alternate reality where the internet was never created. And then I was like, oh yeah, that's true, I guess, right? Because we would have heard things about it, or like the way that things are disseminated, would have fallen into that. But the kind of the main story here is about Belt and his little pet. And you've created this amazing little pet called the Curio, or the Bottomle, which is like a mechanical, very cute, like we're talking otherworldly. You can't even
Chipmunk.
handle
Like
how cute this little like gremlin chipmunk thing is. And it lives in your house, and it's got like a little kind of a shoeboxy type thing that it lives in. It's about 5 inches tall, and it mimics you. It plays with you. It becomes your friend essentially.
I think it lives on you.
It can live on you. Like it can attach itself to your clothing, and you can walk around with it in your pocket and things like that. But it raises some really interesting thematic stuff about how much cute is humanity capable of handling? Because people start to do very weird things with these bottomles, with these curios, like torturing them and eating them, which is called overloading in the book. Because they just can't handle how cute they are, that it's so fucking cute that I just have to ingest it. It's like kind of in that movie, the Paul Thomas Anderson movie Punch Drunk Love, where there's that scene where Adam Sandler and his girlfriend are in bed, and he's like, you're so cute, I just want to fucking smash your face with a sledgehammer. Like it's like that kind of thing going on, and I love that. And
could eat you right up.
And meanwhile there's lots of other characters and things going on with Belt, trying to get money for cigarettes, and there's a cast of amazing characters like John Boat and Lotta Hogg and Chad Kyle and a whole like you talked about Infinite Jest,
Triple J, Fonda Jane Henry.
And so the novel revolves mainly about him and about the loss of his mother and things of that nature, and a study that he undergoes when he's about 12, whereby he acquires this bottomle for the first time, and other kids do, and he's being tested about how he interacts with it. So that's kind of the universe. That's kind of the gist of Bubblegum, I would say. And there's a lot of other stuff going on too. Is that a relatively okay summary, Adam? Does that give too much away?
Yeah, that was impressive, man. No, I think that was good. You kept the spoilers out.
Okay, good deal. Right on. So, Adam, do you want to give us a short reading to give us a sense of the prose, the tenor, the theme, like the sort of the voice of the book?
Absolutely, absolutely. Great. So I'm going to read from a part it's pretty early, and the situation is that just basically Belt, the narrator, needs cigarettes. He smokes a lot of cigarettes. He needs cigarettes, and he has no money, and he's not going to have money for a week. And so he's going to now go try to buy some cigarettes without any money. And the brand of cigarettes he smokes is Quills. So here goes.
It sure is.
Love it.
All right, so here goes. I bought Quills by the carton from Pang at White Hen for almost 10 years. And for 10 years before that, I bought them by the pack there. Pang didn't like me. I don't mean he disliked me. To Pang I was no one, as I am to most people. As most people are to most people, me included. That's how I thought of it. Come to think of it now, though, Pang may have disliked me. After all, it's one thing to be known to a stranger. But I'd engaged Pang in face-to-face commerce at least once a week for nearly 2 decades, and he'd never said even so much as I'm Pang to me. I didn't even know if he was owner or manager. The badge he wore pinned to his shirt didn't say. Maybe I disliked him. In any case, I figured I'd spent enough of my money in his mart to merit 2 cartons worth of credit for a week. So I took a walk over there and made my case. Why no credit card, he said. Sometimes, I said, I get those offers in the mail, but I never saw a need. No, he told me, I did not really ask. I don't understand. You're not credit worthy, he said, or else you'd have a credit card. Come back with money, and then I'll sell to you. Pang, I said, I see you all the time. If our positions were switched, I wouldn't even hesitate to give you what I'm asking for. Maybe that is why you are not credit worthy, he said. I nearly had hold of a pretty good rejoinder, having to do with how the quality of our banter was evidence of a familiarity between us sufficient to permit an extension of credit in either direction, Pang to me or I to Pang. How the curtness of Pang's refusal of my credit card was itself reason for Pang to grant me credit. How his freewheeling bluntness, if nothing else, argued that he felt no anxiety at all about possibly insulting me by saying the wrong thing, which was another way to say that he was comfortable with me, and which probably showed, if he'd only take a moment to look a little more deeply, that he knew in his heart I deserved his trust. But the rejoinder eluded me. I couldn't quite get my mouth around it. Yet something needed saying. I'd stood there too long. I said, "Are you the owner? You want to threaten to tell someone I don't give away quills? Go yell it on a mountain. Go find out who cares. Corporate, you think? Call them. Call corporate. Corporate this guy. I think you were banned from the premises now." All I was saying was your badge just says Pang. It doesn't say owner or manager on it, and I've always wondered. "Oh yeah," Pang said. "And what do you think?" "You sound like an owner," I said. "Okay," Pang said. "Sure, okay. A misunderstanding. Have a double bubble on the house, on me." He pushed a wrapped log of old gum across the counter. "You are once again welcome to shop here with money, or become credit worthy and bring MasterCard, Visa, or American Express. No discover."
That's a great last end there. Yeah.
Let me ask, could you tell us a little bit about choosing the title of this book?
Well, part of it was just like some, wise-ass remnant punk rock thing in me that thought, Bubblegum is like the opposite of what you think of when you think of serious literature.
Yeah, right.
You think of like bubblegum pop or just chewing bubblegum. and I don't know. So I liked that aspect of it. I think bubblegum becomes like, I don't know. I'm not a literary scholar. I think it becomes a leitmotif. Is that the word? I don't know.
Yeah, I'll take it. Motif,
is that even how you say that? Is it leitmotif?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So there's that. I think bubblegum becomes, it is a metaphor for metaphors. This is going to sound really hoity-toity, highfalutin, but it's
That's
he
what we're
riffs
about
on it
here.
a couple times, and I think a lot of the book is thinking about what the cures might be metaphorical for in our world, and I think that bubblegum to belt is metaphorical for things in his world, right? Belt obviously can't talk about the internet because it doesn't exist. I don't know.
I actually find that really interesting because I think a lot of the reviews will pick up on that, and like I want you to explain a little bit more about that, because there's like, it seems like with the curios, like people have replaced their obsession with the internet with their obsession with curios, and like, which are a form of technology, and it's like they're always going to be obsessed with some kind of technology. And it's like, you just read this thing about smoking cigarettes. It's like they're also really addicted to just these animals, right? It's really like a fake animal. It's like a fake high, right? Like they're buying
maybe
it, right?
maybe it's fake.
Maybe it's fake. I mean, it's a little bit fake, but because it's not. I mean, he was given this thing, so as a kid, I guess, like Belt in particular is really bonded with his. His curio is called Blank or Kablanky. I don't know which is appropriate, but his nickname's like. I mean, he really loves this animal, and but yet, do you feel like that it is a bit of a stand-in for, even if there wasn't the internet, there would be something else that people would be obsessed with?
I mean, I think I think that like first, obviously, like there is a part of. Curios are partly riffing on the internet and the way that we use it to sort of cruel ends. But I'm not a moralizing writer. Like I think, or maybe I am. I don't think I am. And I think that it ends up I think whether it's the internet or a curio or kind of like any technology we can think of, we're always going to use it to do cruel shit. And I think it ends up, technology is just, the thing that's interesting about technology in literature is how people use it, not the technology itself, at least to me.
Right.
And maybe that's the difference between a book like mine and like a more conventional hard sci-fi kind of book. Is like I'm actually more interested in how people interact with this curio than I am in the origins or the possibilities of the curio as a being, like the getting the science right or something.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that, the curio, like the internet, because I'm not actually entirely convinced at all that the curio isn't an animal. But that's for the reader to deal with.
Yeah, that's certainly a tension in the book that you're like, is this technology? Is this living? What are we dealing with here? And that's something that I thought was palpable throughout as well.
I appreciate that. I mean, because one of the things, I think that, it sort of goes along with that, for me at least. I don't want to interpret my own book too much, but I think that, one of the things that we do with the internet, with the sort of cruelty that people can show one another on the internet, which I'm not really subject to because I'm not on any social media except for Facebook, but it seems to me that people are really able to convince themselves very easily that whatever that when they're by themselves, when they're sort of the master of their little screen domain, what they do goes, and they are righteous and they are correct, and they can crush other people and say horrible shit to them and harm them. And I think that if this is if some of the things that get said on Twitter were to be said to a group of live human beings, like they just wouldn't be said, because there would either be some extreme violence that resulted from it, but more likely they wouldn't get said because the speaker would realize that they would be the subject of extreme violence. But they can say it on Twitter because they're not going to be the subject of extreme violence, and they might even have people cheer them on because people like to see cruel shit happen. And I think that with the curios, the thing that's interesting to me, at least one of the things, is that I do think that if such a thing as a curio existed, people would very quickly decide that they were right to harm them because they felt like they should harm them, and they were given permission.
They had the right to,
by the corporation that made them, because they said these are robots and they're not animals. This book must sound really weird to anyone who hasn't read it.
Well, it kind of is, but it's
probably
weird
sort of
in like
out there
the
conversation,
most
so we have to read it.
delightful kind of way. One thing that I thought of about this while I was reading is that thematically, the idea of people overloading on cures, which is like ingesting them, and there's even a part where people make them into a drug called spidge, and there's a very long description of this about a film where someone is like taking the spines of these curios and mashing the spines up and making a drug out of them. It reminds me a lot of what Wallace is talking about in Infinite Jest in terms of like the preoccupation that we have with entertainment and technology and the ways we're addicted to it. And you really take that like even a step further here, where the technologies themselves are being taken and ingested as literal drugs of addiction. So in Infinite Jest, we have the samizdat, the entertainment, which you will just atrophy and die because you watch it over and over. The metaphor here in your book of Bubblegum is that people are like mashing up the videotape of Infinite Jest and like ingesting it as a drug. So it's like you push it even like a step further beyond what Wallace does, and I found that fascinating. And like wanted to hear your thoughts more on that, which I think you just did really well as well. So.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think the Wallace version has a lot more hope in that. Like, I think that there's in Wallace there's justice, right? To some degree, there's at least it is bad that people are watching this video, right? We're not
right.
Like you don't say that's what you get.
It's a terrorist
actually,
weapon, right? And like people are trying to weaponize it.
Yeah. And I think in Bubblegum, I think one of the tensions for me at least was to not do that. Because actually nobody in any overt material way at least suffers from this stuff. Like, because the spidge actually, it's one thing you said that I don't think is correct, is it's not actually addictive. Like no one's losing their job because they're addicted to spidge.
Right,
No
okay,
one's,
yeah.
like these people are committing these sort of atrocities every day,
Yeah.
and just going on. And like, so it's not, whereas I think in Infinite Jest, there is like this, you're cheering for this sort of community, or these multiple communities really to be all right. And maybe not so much in Bubblegum. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure. I wrote it, so I don't know what you're doing. I got my own whacked out.
There's
thoughts.
there are a lot of like set pieces in this book, though, and the one that you read is sort of, with the main narrative of Belt Magnet, who's the main character. But there are a lot of other characters, as we mentioned. And there are a lot of other themes in the book, too, that I wanted to ask you about. Sure. One is that in this sort of alternate reality, prostitution is 100% legal. Mm-hmm. And, like, there's also one of the key characters is, like, an intersex character.
Yep.
And, like, what's your interest there about either, like, imagining a future with prostitution is totally non-prosecuted and... a key character being like an intersex character.
Well, it's sort of, I sort of kind of fell into both of those. I thought, first off, I liked the idea of having, because it's not just like she's a key intersex character. She's like the great sex symbol of all time too.
Right. Yeah.
And she's an extremely powerful person, and she's a sort of worshipped critical theorist, right? Mm-hmm. And so she's this brilliant, beautiful human. Who's also obscenely wealthy and maybe kind of hideous deep down, like everyone else. Yeah. But she acquires this wealth over time. In large part marrying this billionaire fellow. But she is in her own right. She is a force. And so I thought that was interesting because I just thought it would be hard to do, so I wanted to do it. And I guess. That, and in terms of the prostitution being legal, so she plays a kind of a large role in it becoming legal, and I think to me there's this hope that when that's being described, a lot of this stuff, a lot of the sort of historical stuff for this book, like what the 1982 to 2012 looked like. Is in the shadow of the book. Like you can pick it up if you really want to, and so like the sort of her rhetorical approach to the argument that prostitution should be legal, which sort of ultimately wins out, is that is sort of based on curios,
right?
and what people are allowed to do to them, and what it means to and ditto her presumable stance for, transgender rights. Like because again, not to get into too many spoilers, but there are a lot of things you can do with curios. There are a lot of products one can use to enhance one's curio, to change one's curio. And anyway, so there's part of it's that, and then part of it also is sort of imagining. I sometimes think, when we talk about the internet. We talk about it as this, and I think this is changing now, but it's been long talked about as this sort of great emancipator of people, and like it brings together communities, and this is already sort of old hat that's sort of bullshit. But I wonder like if the degree to which it's bullshit isn't appreciated, and sometimes I think that issues that we're having now, like these sort of social issues that I think are usually sort of used by the right to kind of distract people, such as these issues around gender. I think they might have been resolved a lot easier without an internet. Like, I don't know. Like, we had...
For sure.
Like we're in this very strange time where, it's still pretty weird. I don't want to get too political, but it's pretty weird to me that like, it seems like most of the country became aware of transgender people through this rich sort of, not like this athlete who was really wealthy and is really right wing actually, and Caitlyn Jenner, she's like she's not like most of the transgender folks I meet. They don't have a lot in common with Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
you know, sociopolitically, socioeconomically, and it's like she became the world's introduction, or America's introduction to these folks, and again, and even grouping them as these folks, it's weird, man, and like I just sort of think that with the internet giving rise to Kardashianism, you know, like all these things, like you just sort of wonder, like, what would have happened, like there, like without it, if things went a little slower and a little saner, then it wouldn't just be the first, you know, rich reality star who popularized something. Things would have come about in a more sort of, humans are a lot slower than the internet, kind of way, would have come about a little more smoothly. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Well, and there aren't a lot of, you know, literary characters like that, right? That are not just transgender, but like ambiguously gendered or sexed.
Yeah, well, she's not trans. I mean, she's intersex. Yeah,
she's intersex, right? But like also just, you know, being a successful, I don't know, scholar, billionaire's wife, all of that stuff. I mean, I bonded a little bit with that character because I felt like she was the same age as me, and it said her parents was from Austin, Texas, and I was like,
sold.
I'm gonna highlight that fucking note right there.
Matt really likes Austin.
You know, going back to the I really did like. I mean, I like you should say hello Detroit. I'm like, woohoo. But
that's what I was aiming for, man. The Texas market, man.
Put in anything like. You know, she was from San Antonio secondarily. No. But the other like set pieces that are in the book, I mean, that's a big part of the book. And again, I'm not trying to like jump around too much, but going back to Belt, you know, there's a big part of his narrative that is about just fucking murdering swing sets.
Yeah.
I almost mentioned that in my synopsis,
that's
but I thought I'd leave that for you, Matt, because I know you love that stuff.
No, I mean, I love the just like absolutely destroying swing sets.
Yeah.
And, you know, my question here is really like a pretty broad one, because it really gets to like something that I would have done when I was an adolescent. And, you know, maybe even a child, right? We actually had an old swing set when I was like 8. Yeah. And I wanted to fucking destroy it.
This was around the time of like Beavis and Butthead, where everything was like smash it, destroy it, like destruction of public property. It was so cool among my friends when we were in like 8th grade.
I got like,
you know?
5 years on Dave, so I'm a little older than that. I was like a little bit older. But let's even go back and just say like what in general... I mean, maybe this is too personal, Adam, but like, what was your childhood like, man? What is your interest in the minds of the adolescents now?
I have a big question about this coming
adolescent
up too.
narrative.
Well, I mean, I don't know. You know, with the instructions, is very different from this in that, like, in the instructions, I was, you know, he's really like Gorian is, you know, he's 10. And like he doesn't think like, you know, regular.
No, not at all.
His friends, but I think part of that was just the sort of, you have this institutional setting, and you have, I think that with children, I don't want to like repeat myself. I've said something like this before, but I like violence in art, in narrative.
That is apparent, Adam.
I know. I mean, I do. I enjoy reading it. It's an aesthetic pleasure. I don't want to commit violence in life. But in narrative, it's exciting. It's dramatic, and
absolutely.
And I think that with the instructions, having, you know, little kids doing violence is the excitement there for me as a writer is that, like, really, like a little kid, a 10-year-old boy. I mean, if he hit you as hard as he could, it really wouldn't do much, you know. And it's like, and so like when they're doing it to each other, there really is like it's more psychological. I got in a lot of fights when I was a kid, and it was like no one, like they felt epic as hell.
Yeah.
But like no one like really got that hurt, and it's because like you just can't do that much damage unless, you know, someone falls off like a building or something,
or you have a penny gun, or
you know,
something.
and you know all those rooftop fist fights, you know, that little 10-year-olds have, you know, like it's not gonna ever get too dire until, you know, in the instructions it sort of does, but you know, by weapons. Yeah. But I
was reading your Rumpus interview from 10 years ago from that group read, and Christie said, I felt like the entire novel was one big crescendo, every page I turned, the story got a little louder. I could barely hear by the end. And it reminds me of like a Godspeed You Black Emperor song, that book. Like 20 to 30 minutes of slow build, and it just like keeps getting heavier, and eventually it's just absolute carnage. This book, Bubblegum, is not, I would not put it in the same kind of trajectory as that.
No, very deliberately.
Yeah.
Very deliberately. I mean, one of the appeals with Belt for me was like, I had spent 10 years with the Instructions writing this extremely active narrator, right? Like the least possibly passive human being that can exist. Like he's just, everything happens because of him, right? Yeah. Like constantly. Like, and with Belt, I thought, I want to see if I can do something with a more passive narrator, which is not to say he's, I mean, I guess he is rather passive in a way.
Yeah.
But he's more like a reader,
Totally.
like he's more like the average. He's more like me.
He lives a slow life. He like smokes his cigarettes. Goes for walks.
Yeah. He's not trying to right the wrongs of the world either. He doesn't really seek justice. He's like, trying to, just have an okay life, I guess. Yeah. And also, I mean, I find it, like, not to underplay Belt, I mean, I feel like Belt has a pretty peculiar life. Sure. But he's not going out and bashing skulls, at least not often. Yeah. And
he doesn't have a messiah
bashing
complex
swing sets
either.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. Like he doesn't, not at all. No, he's pretty humble. Yeah. Without being without being too cloying, like, because I think he thinks pretty highly of his work.
Yes.
But yeah, he's not trying to, he knows his weaknesses. And I think, but as far as like going back to what you were asking earlier, Matt, with the regarding the swing set destruction, I mean, I guess, what was interesting to me about that, without giving too much away of the book, is that, there's this sort of community's reception of that, like the children versus the adults, the way they take that. Yeah. And then no one gets what he's doing. Because what he's doing, like his motives for attacking these swing sets is, they're very different.
No, Matt's question is great about teenagers, because it occurred to me kind of recently, actually, that like most of the novels that I really love, I put together that they either are from the perspectives of teenagers or largely revolve around teenagers. So I've said lots on the show that like The Instructions is like my favorite novel, up along with Infinite Jest. And then, there's largely a lot of teens in both novels. And the sense of slang that you develop in both of your books, and like very unique vocabulary and diction, is one of my favorite things about your writing. And, Wallace is good at this too. He creates this universe of slang that you've never heard anywhere else. And so here are a few examples from Bubblegum. Why the long face, fuck ass? Shut your pie hole, cake face. Pissing through a boner. And then in the Instructions, you've got insults like banter, schmendrick, dentist, things like brick, snat, and trickle. Your use of names is very, very funny. I read some earlier. Where do you summon all of this stuff from? It's just like one of the most fascinating things about your writing for me. And the fact that teenagers and kids are using it is like adds so much humor and value to it as well.
I appreciate that. I mean, I like, I don't know, man. Like I honestly, like, I write.
Do you use these? Do you use these terms in your everyday vernacular?
No, not at all. Not at all. No, I mean, but we do, like, especially, now I've been married for over 7 years, and like my wife and I, we say some really weird shit to each other that no one would understand, and I'm sure you guys, you two are married, you probably do the same thing. Like, I just think, and with my my groups of friends, there's these sort of codes that arise. Yeah. And and I think it feels socially correct. It shows that it gives a sense of reality when characters do that. So I think that's one of the appeals to it. But as for like getting the ones that I end up choosing, I think I try to, it first of all has to do with what I think is going to sound kind of funny. Yeah. Because I'm basically usually trying to make a joke. Yeah. And then like on top of it, like, there's sometimes when I think about, like, the etymology, like, in Bubblegum, like, without getting into it here, like, DACT.
Yeah.
Like, this took me, like, a while, and then I was like, DACT is perfect, but that was replaced, like, 19 times. I had to do, like, a find replace, like, throughout the years of writing the books. I was like, no, and I finally landed on DACT. I was like, DACT is the one.
Oh, wow.
And, like...
That's cool.
And I was just like, okay, like, so this stuff, and I felt like that felt really organic to me, like, where I was like, yeah, this is, they would use this to mean what DACT means. Mm-hmm. And the reader will be able to sort of track that. Because that is what would happen. Like, that seemed true to me. So I think that's,
I got to the point, I think it's page 269, I flagged Dave, where I wrote, Adam is a profanity enthusiast.
I am a profanity enthusiast, absolutely.
Absolutely just takes pleasure in inventing new profanities.
Absolutely.
I was deeply impressed with, and it's like probably like a 13-year-old boy. I have my oldest son will be 13 next month. He will probably celebrate in quarantine.
Oh, no. Too bad.
In his private cell. But I can tell you that the amount of 13-year-old boy profanity is like spot on.
Yeah.
And I anyone who's listening to this later, I would say go to page about 269, and there's a great exchange there with all kinds of cursing with a little kid.
I'm looking at you. I'm going to 269. I want to know what
Bertrand.
scene
Me too.
It's Bertrand. Really yeah.
Suspender. Mikey Likey meets Suspender, and that's really.
Why
great
is that
scene.
ass captain?
And I was like, anal rectum. I mean, it's good. It's good.
Oh yeah. The bottom of 268 is some of the foulest stuff I've ever seen yet.
Good.
I was like, it's just a straight up the way that in the Christmas Story movie, it was like some parents would work in paints and oils, and my father worked in profanity. It's like I feel like one of Adam's mediums is like profanity. It's really good.
Really good. Yeah, I like swearing.
But one of the other like set pieces, I mean, there's so many like set pieces we have not like talked about, or parts of this book that fit together. And I, part of it for me, I have a question for you about films. Like a lot of it just seems very cinematic, and there's some in here that's really directly about making like a film.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk to you about like your interest in film, and like how you see when you're writing, how are you visualizing as you write?
That's a hard one. Like I think about sound more than anything. And I think that when I got to there's a section, I think we could say without being a spoiler, there's a section where a movie is described. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty long. And in the instructions, there's the sort of big crescendoing violence scene, this sort of war. That's... those two things are a bit similar in that like they're sort of set off in this way that actually like in Infinite Jest, Ashatan, or like in what's how I think of it, or in End Zone, the football game, are set off where it's just that I feel when I'm reading, like I'm like I need the pace to switch, and there's things I want to tell them rapidly right now. And not as a writer, but as a reader, and as a writer too. But mostly as a reader, I think something I need to push the reader through a different place. And so with describing the films describing that film was a way to do that. And it was the film accomplishes a lot of stuff in terms of I think backstory and
totally.
The history of this world.
Yeah.
But I wanted to. I mostly wanted to sort of switch gears, and then the idea of doing this film, that whole sort of third book in the novel, is about kind of switching gears, and we get away from Belt a bit, and we get more into this other character, Triple J, and I don't know, and sort of seeing the world from a sort of higher up place than this, right inside the back of Belt's eyeballs. So I think that's what was kind of interesting to me about that, and also the notion that the filmmaker, this kid Triple J, that we got to think about a kid who would make this movie. I think that, so that was kind of the way I wanted to. That I think, I'm not sure if that answers your question. I'm bad with that.
Totally, it does.
Like the device of it is that it can convey a lot of information in a short amount of space that fills in a lot of gaps about this universe that you've created. That's maybe a good seg to the portion that I wanted to read, actually, as we're talking about things like slang and the way that you create kind of a verbal linguistic universe that's very unique in your writing. So this is from page 10. I tried to pick an early one so we could avoid, spoilers. So this is Belt and his dad listening to the radio. On the drive home, my dad turned to 88.1 community radio to hear the local sports show. An interviewer said, "We're live in the dugout with Johnny John Boat Pelmore Jason and his Washington Mustangs, who John Boat just led to a 10-0 no-hitter victory over the mighty Twin Grove Eagles. Now, John Boat, I'm serious here. What gives? In fall, you're triple-doubling center one day, and next you're a golden arm quarterback / blitz-a-quarter nose tackle. That's confusing enough. Now it's spring, and you're telling me you've pitched a no-hitter and gotten on base at your every at-bat? How do you do it? Is there anything can stop you?" "I don't know," John Boat said. "I really don't know. I guess I try to keep my head down and do the necessary work. This is sports. It's for real. It matters to people. I think others could do the same things I do. Other teams could do the same things we do. The physical machinery, it's there to be honed, to be made useful. I really believe that. I mean, you saw the Eagles. It's not that they're shrimpy. They've got legs, arms, and eyes, brains in their heads. They've got the same equipment we Mustangs have. It's just that they're not willing to put in the work. They're, I don't know, I guess, how can I put it? They're pissing through a boner." "Come again, John Boat?" the interviewer said. I didn't quite get that. "Well, you know what I mean. They're pissing through a boner. They're pissing through a boner, and that's not why they have one." "They're pissing through a boner, and that's not why they have one. Aphoristic wisdom from our own Johnny John Boat Scion of the Pelmores and Jasons the both. Kids these days. So tell me, John Boat, rumor has it Papa John's about to buy..." I shut off the radio. "Hey," said my father. "He stole that from me, pissing through a boner. I invented that. It's mine." "Relax," said my father. "Stop with the crying. Stop kicking the glove box." "Stop kicking the glove box? He stole my line. I made it up myself. I was sad when I thought of it. It meant something specific, and he changed the meaning so that now it's too broad. And then he added a clause to explain it all to dummies. And that's not why they have one. No kidding, huh? Boners aren't meant for pissing through, dude. I had no idea. I really didn't. Thanks for the clarification, John Boat. He ruined it completely. First he stole it, then he destroyed it." "Billy, listen," said my father. "That's not my fucking name." So when I was reading this scene, Adam, I was in bed and I was like crying, laughing. And my wife, Rachel, was looking like side-eyeing me like, what the hell is going on over there? Just imagining this kid, this like 12-year-old or teenager giving this interview and saying that to like live on air. It was one of the funniest moments in the book for me. And then there's like a really visceral human response from the main character Belt about how this phrase got cribbed from him and co-opted into something that it wasn't supposed to mean. So hopefully that gives our listeners a sense of your prose and a sense of just this mind that you have for creating really hilarious, off the wall, but also poignant fiction. And I think that's one reason that myself and Matt and a lot of other people who like Wallace, his work resonates with us because, like you said, Infinite Jest is so funny, but also is so human. And he weaves those things in a way that makes for some of the most compelling fiction on the planet.
Appreciate that, man.
It's not just funny. I mean, the one of the funniest parts to me that I had flagged, or one of the best parts I had flagged, was later in the book, John Boat tells a little story about Chuck Yeager and King Hussein, and I really recommend anyone once you get to that point, like, feel free to email me. Cry. It's like late in the 500-600 pages, but it's really fucking awesome part of the book. But I think, one thing that makes your book great too is that it's not just funny and interesting premise, that it has this kind of emotional center, and that is a lot of Belt's relationships, especially with the story about his mother.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you about how you saw Belt. A lot of it is with his father, but then go back and tell us what was the thought process of getting with his mother.
Well, with his mother, I mean, at first it was just, like I said, I write really line to line. And so I thought, okay, something's got to, this line really early demanded that something happened to change things. And I thought, his mother died, right? And then I thought, I never want to be slight about anything, right? And so I think this sort of grew. I was like, okay, so he doesn't have a mother. So for a while, he just doesn't have a mother because she died when he was young. And then I thought, who's this mother? And the structure of the novel is, this first part is set present day. The second part is set when he's a boy. And then the third part is this weird thing I was talking about before, this sort of offset part. Then we go back to the present day in the fourth and the fifth book. And in that second book, I was just like his mom, I think sort of accounts, because when you see Belt's father is sort of, at least on the surface, extremely different from him. And you wonder, like, how this kid kind of, who we find out what he kind of went through as a kid separate from his mother's death, like how this kid could have really survived such a childhood and come out in any kind of, shape where he'd be communicating via a fictional memoir, and I think that I started thinking about it, who is his mom? How would she take him through this? And I think his mom to me is the, in terms of like like the characters in the book, they all have these, basically his mom is ideal to me, like for him. She is, I think, probably the best mom he could have had, and I think that when I realized I liked her and that I wasn't gonna be really ironic about her because Belt wouldn't be, because I'm putting on the Belt helmet when I'm writing. Like, I'm like, Belt's not like comfortable joking about how his mom died when he was a kid. Like, this fucked him up.
Yeah.
And I thought, so okay, so like, how do I make this not sappy and like make her, kind of this good person who's really, hopefully interesting to read about. And so that was the solving that problem, was the getting to who's Belt's mom was. And I think for me it was very emotional for me to write. I mean, not for any autobiographical reasons. I mean, I love my mom; she's great. But it's like, but it wasn't my mom. My mom's alive. And I think I just, but
emotionally, I think what's interesting there is the role of the pets and the bottomals, and that Belt really bonds with his specific bottomal. His cure is his like companion, especially around the time that his mother dies.
Right.
And it's sort of like the way, I guess, emotional support animals exist now, but they're kind of like widely mocked.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, as if a guy gets on a plane with like an emotional support peacock or a horse, it's like a joke.
Like the word snowflake is usually going to follow in that sentence at some point.
And it sort of starts out like that in the book, the snowflake.
Yeah.
It starts out like that in the book, but it's not. It's much more serious than that later on when the average person has them. And I guess I wanted to ask if you were coming at it from that angle, or it was more just like how people treat pets in general, rather than like emotional support.
Yeah, I mean, I would say both. I think people are generally pretty kind to their pets. How people? I mean, I think people in the States especially, and this is like a thing, they're kinder to their pets than they are to their kids. But I think I did certainly think a lot about emotional support animals, and not really that sort of, because I do think a lot of that is sort of bullshit. I know people who, they get some, certificates so they can take their dog to the restaurant, and it's bullshit. But but that came from something that is very real. Where there are people like first of all, you have the dogs for epileptic people. I mean, you know about those? Like,
they can signal if you're about to have an attack, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you can be you take it in your car. It lets people who have epilepsy drive, because the dog will start freaking out if you're about a minute away from having a seizure, and so you can pull over. And it's so animals are, and there are. I read about there was a guy who had, I think it was a macaw who was schizophrenic, and the macaw would just and I have a bird, so it's especially, to me touching, but it's this guy would start to have, a sort of a psychotic episode, and the bird, he didn't talk him down the way a shrink would. He would just be like, buddy, it's okay, or say whatever line it was. And this guy knew, he's an intelligent human being, he just has this disease. This guy would know that he was in the midst of a psychotic episode rather than a non-psychotic episode. And it would allow him to experience this episode with a larger grain of salt. So I think that that this interaction between humans and animals is fascinating to me. It's really weird, with this parrot that I have. I mean, which I think has a lot to do with how I thought about blank throughout the book, about Bell's Curio. I had this, I grew up not giving a shit about animals and really sort of thinking everyone anthropomorphized them and that they were these, sort of unhygienic, smelly pieces of furniture that just were in my way. I didn't like them much, And I would see a cute animal and be like, it's a cute animal. This is stupid. This is rotting my mind to look at this animal. I was really, I'm not a nice person. But then, one day though, I went to this party with this ex of mine. And it was a shitty party. It was really lame, and it was Chicago, and it was winter, and so we just wanted to dive out of there, but we had to go get our coats. And the hostess, she caught us leaving, right? And this party sucked. We really wanted to go, and she said, you have to come meet Buddy, right? And I was like, meet Buddy, and we had it was the hostess, she caught us, and so we go into her bedroom, and she has this parakeet, man, this tiny white parakeet, and she's like, that's Buddy, and I'm like, great, who gives a shit about Buddy? And she opens the door to the cage, and this bird, it flies out onto my shoulder. Okay, and it was a totally bizarre moment. This bird is on my shoulder. It flew to my shoulder, and for the first time, seriously, because I'm a moron. I was 30, no, older than that. I think it was 30, 31, 32. For the first time, I was this thing has made a choice. It was a really weird thing. It was I was this bird wants to be on my shoulder, so it went to my shoulder, and this was revelatory to me. Which I think any, decent-hearted 4-year-old, they see this in animals, but I never had. And so I became interested in animals suddenly, or at least in birds. And I went home, and I for, I think, 3 months, I watched bird videos online instead of writing. Oh, wow. Okay? And I was trying to finish the instructions. And, it was killing me. I was really down to, I was writing at that time, I'd written, wake up really early, man. I was adjuncting everywhere. And I would be writing 7 hours a day anyway. And then it was suddenly down to 45 minutes, right? and for 3 months it was like that, And then I was like, fuck, man, I have to get a bird. And I got the bird, and I can hang out with the bird whenever. And I don't have to go searching for photos of the bird that are gonna make me get all ooky inside, because I could just look up and there he is. Yeah. And then I finished the book. But the point is, I was able to write again. So yeah. So anyway, that was a really long story.
Tell us what the bird can say. What can the bird say?
He doesn't say a lot, because I felt like it was sort of. I taught him to say hi. I taught him to say his name. I incidentally taught him to say good birdie, and he says step up. But I started feeling it was dehumanizing to him to train him in that way. And so it was because he just picks up stuff on his own. So if I'm hanging out with him, for a while, I would write with him on my shoulder. which is really a cheesy image that I don't want anyone to keep too long in their head. But like, you know, I
very pirate-esque.
It's a little, but I would, you know, I for rhythm or whatever, I read stuff out loud that I'm writing to myself and like sort of under my breath. And so he started like whispering. Like, so he now whispers. If you make whispering sounds out of him, he whispers. He does really weird shit. What he chooses to mimic is like completely his.
Oh, that's cool.
You know? Yeah, and it's random, but he has very few words. He got like 4 words. You know?
Oh, yeah. Was this kind of like the impetus for the parrot who belongs to the character Sally the Balls in Bubblegum?
Absolutely.
The swearing parrot?
Absolutely. Yeah, because I've seen a swearing parrot. I saw some of the bird videos I saw were swearing parrots, and it actually offended me. And as you said, like, I love profanity.
Yeah.
But it's gross when a bird does it.
It seems so up your alley that a bird would swear, you know?
Yeah, no, to me, it's like, it's weird because it's so uncool because they don't know what they're saying. Like, the whole thing that you get with them is like I think birds are brilliant. I mean, everyone's seen the videos of crows and whatever. It's just turning into a show about fucking birds. But like,
this is Jonathan Franzen's ornithography podcast.
No, we're gonna ornithology. We're gonna edit all this.
No, but I mean, I think they're brilliant in a lot of ways, and but they don't use language the way we do, and so, you know, it's really upsetting for me to think that like a parrot is cursing and what he's trying to say is like, come hang out with me.
Oh, right.
And he's like saying, you know, like, fuck shit ass, you know, like that's like that's humiliating for the parrot.
It's really about intent
somehow.
Right? Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
This whole cuteness thing reminds me of how, like, before I became a parent, I would be so annoyed when people would post like 1,000 photos of their new kid on Instagram or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I became a parent and I just did that exact thing because there's something about newborns that is just fascinatingly adorable.
Right.
And birds, animals fall into this.
But the opposite of that is sort of one other thing we have not talked about, which is, you know, the inanimate objects that Belt can communicate with. So
right.
you can communicate with a bird, even like you say, through nonverbal cues, through, you know, you could be blind and communicate with any animal, I think. But inanimate objects.
Nice segment.
You know,
good.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Sorry, but it's on my list. It's on my list of questions. And I think that it's pronounced inans, right?
Inans, yeah.
It's a short for inanimate objects that he can
telepathically,
I don't know, listen to, hear. And they really fuck with him. And I should also put in a disclaimer here that Belt is like diagnosed psychotic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like he can hear inanimate objects the same way that like maybe some people could hear ghosts, or maybe some people could hear any voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to ask you about that, of like, how seriously do we take a psychotic narrator telling us to say that he can talk to inanimate objects?
Right. That's the question. Right. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was sort of, let me see if I can explain this right. Like, as the book went on, I kind of wanted to triangulate this thing between the reader, Belt, and the world Belt lives in, where it would be that so the reader goes, okay, this guy thinks he talks to inanimate objects. He's psychotic, because Belt almost will admit that that's what's going on, right? But not quite. And then at the same time, I kind of wanted the reader to feel like the curios were living things, right? So like. But the world Belt's living in, the reader is allied with that world, and that the world thinks Belt's psychotic for thinking that he speaks with inanimate objects. The world also thinks, though, that Belt is psychotic for any thoughts he might express about curios being, you know, animals. And then the reader is in this place where he's split between the two. That was the hope, is that he's going, well, you know, maybe the reader's saying, well, you know, Belt seems correct about these curios. They're convincingly animals, or they might be. But the world is also, the world in the novel is right in saying Belt is psychotic for believing that he speaks to inanimate objects. So where that puts the reader is this sort of, like I said, triangulation. I don't know if that's the right word, but I wanted that to be kind of a tension in the book, because I think that, you know, also what the objects say, even as a reader, if you're going, whether you're believing that Belt is really talking to inanimate objects or not, what the content of what they're saying to him, if you believe that it's not coming from the objects, you believe it's coming from Belt. And you say, well, so what does that say about Belt? What does that say about the way Belt views the world, the way he views objects, animals, etc.? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think readers who haven't read the book yet, they're going to be very interested in that part of Belt's sort of inner life. And that kind of goes back with what Dave was saying. I do want to just point out we've been like well past the point where I normally say, like, do you have any final questions? And I just don't even want to I don't even want to bring up the fact that like time exists.
It's because all that bird shit I said was so fascinating. You were like, this
look,
guy was just talking about birds forever.
Adam, I'm a fucking bird person. Okay, I am not.
It's true.
Often with like literary stuff, it comes up with like, oh, you like Jonathan Franzen's descriptions of birds. Like, no, but I really do. I'm super interested in birds. Period. But like exactly what you're saying earlier about crows being smart. I think after humans, like it's crows, and there's an argument of like. There's an African gray parrot named Alex that apparently remembers like up to like 40, 50 different human emotions and faces and can do all kinds of logic games and stuff and make tools and shit. And so like, yes, I think it's worth talking about like what level do humans exist on the same plane as, animals that might outlive us at the current moment that we're in. Yeah. But actually, one of the last questions before, like, I fucking forget, because, like, I had so many questions reading this book. But really, like, one of my final questions for you is really about just being a writer. And, we mentioned at the top of the show that you just recently, like, this fucking month, had a short story in the New Yorker, which is, like, the American pantheon of publishing short stories, man. There's like, that's it. There's nowhere like higher you're going to go to get like, that's like the Olympic gold medal of publishing a short story. And they only do like 40 a year. And like, your teachers have a couple of in there, like George Saunders is going to have some. It's so like, you have them in there. And I mean, this is a question like, we can't interview, David Foster Wallace anymore. We've talked to some other successful writers. Deborah Treisman has come to some Wallace stuff in the past, but like talking about it from your point of the end, like a lot of writers will say like, well, it's not really about that. Or like, I can't be focused on that. And it's like, well, I guess I'm asking you like, well then how much does that type of shit matter to you and how much does it not? And if not, like, then what is it that matters? Well, like, what is the thing that you care about? Well,
I would say, I mean, look, the New Yorker thing was like this phenomenal thing. It was one of the great things that happened to me. I was very happy. I'm still happy that story was in there. I'm still a little buzzed off of it, And it was like, it's great to work with them, but at the same time, I mean, I think you guys know, like, I'm married to someone who's published 4 stories in the New Yorker, and they were the first 4 short stories she ever wrote, and she's writing them in her second language after she's been a published fiction writer in her first language, which is French. So it's like, it's sort of like, it was like, well, thank God,
Finally caught up a little bit.
You're just catching up, man.
Not even close, but I'm still, I'm still in the game or whatever. No, I mean, like, but it was huge for me. It was a really big deal, and like the editing process was actually really exciting, and I loved it. And of course I wanted a short story in the New Yorker. I want people to read my work, and if someone's going to read a short story, the odds are highest that they're going to read it in the New Yorker, right? Like, just period. Right. That's this huge audience. And so that was great, and obviously, like, most of the writers that I have loved throughout my life have been published in the New Yorker. Quite a few haven't, however. And so it's like, to say it's definitely not about getting a story in the New Yorker. It's thrilling to get a story in the New Yorker. I would love it if it happened again. But no, I mean, what writing is about for me is First off, it's a thing that I have just done every day since I was 17 religiously, and it's like as close to a religion as I have is writing fiction. Like that's all I've ever written, apart from one moment where I wrote nonfiction for Playboy. Excuse me, and that was ulteriorly motivated so that I could chase my wife. So I don't know, man. Fiction is. I feel crazy when I'm not reading something that I enjoy, and I feel crazy when I'm not writing something that I think could become worth reading. And it's been so long at this point; it's more than half my life by a pretty big long shot that I've just written every day and read every day. That it's hard for me to say what it's about, right? But it's like it's sort of the point of everything for me. I don't know. That's. If there's a point to anything.
I feel like there's a moment in Bubblegum where we have someone talking about art and empathy. And I wondered if that kind of project, and Wallace, a lot of Wallace scholars have talked about Wallace and empathy, and the 1993 Larry McCaffrey interview that Wallace did, empathy is kind of his big thing about what fiction's about, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's part of your project as well? Like your character here in 574 says, and empathy, man, that's the big one. Empathy in art. I mean, it's how you see the artist's truth through his eyes by feeling it, right? Empathy. I'm saying if you're going to inspire with a work of art, that's the first thing you need to make happen. Empathy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I was kind of mocking that idea really. No, I mean, I really was like, not because I think empathy is not useful in art, but like, I think art is art. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say, this is my whole thing is like, I'm really just as far from a scholar of art or literature as one can be. Like, I like love to read, and I always have, and love to read fiction particularly.
Yeah.
And, I think that I cannot give an honest account of what makes all fiction great. Right? There's outliers for everything, and sometimes the outliers are the best.
Yeah.
And so Wallace certainly creates a lot of empathy with his characters, and George Saunders does, and Salinger does, and I love all of those writers. My wife does, and I think that some of my characters I create some empathy with them, but that's certainly not like the goal. Like if there's a goal, then I want to undermine it at any point in my work. Like the second that I have an idea, I try to destroy it. Like I don't know what that impulse really is, but an example of a writer where there's not a lot of empathy, who I adore, who I imagine you guys do too, is DeLillo.
Oh, yeah.
Like you don't like. I mean, White Noise is like one of my favorite novels.
Yeah.
But it's not because I so feel for Jack Gladney. Like it's just because it's fucking magic, because it's art. It's doing a thing, and I know this. You guys are more scholarly, and you probably actually have like a legit good explanation for what would make White Noise great. But to me, I'm just like I'm blown away by this. I couldn't have done this. Like no matter how many times I read it, I don't know how he decided to make the moves he made. I can see the moves he makes, and I can say these work, and I can't really say why. The same would go for Kafka. I don't know. The same would go for Europeana by Patrick Rednick. I think there's all this. There's so much cold kind of literature that I love. That as much as I try, my tendency is to write warm, intimate literature. Like I can't say that the point of literature is to be warm and intimate.
Right.
That's maybe what I have more of a talent for. But it's not the goal.
Right. Yeah.
Well, with DeLillo, though, I mean, that's very much like at the sentence level, his work is magic. And when earlier we were talking about your interest in cursing and profanity, and but that's an evidence, or that's like proof of your focus on a word by word construction of a sentence, which becomes part of a paragraph, which becomes part of a page. And that's very much part of, I think, DeLillo's method, and that you're right. He is not trying to achieve an empathetic character. He is trying to build a temple, right? He's trying to build a work of art that you can stand back and just run your fingers over and admire like a long time later.
Yeah.
And I definitely get that tradition, from a lot of what you have done at the novel level and the short story level.
Thanks.
So that actually makes a lot of sense to me. And, I appreciate you putting up with my kind of facile question about like, you've been there, Lily. You've published stuff in the New Yorker. You've published a 1,000-page novel. You've got this new book, which is going to be well supported by your new publisher. I don't think you've ever been published by Doubleday before.
No.
So they're going to promote the shit out of this book, and we can't wait to see how it works out. So I'm rooting for you.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Yeah, and yeah, I don't think your question was facile. I mean, I think it's I hope my answer wasn't. I don't.
No. I think it's just a very simplistic question a lot of writers get is like, what are you aiming for? And that's sort of me. Like, how do I judge a book? Is like, are you aiming at a target and do you hit it cleanly, or are you aiming at something that I can't even see? And at the sentence level, I definitely get that. I mean, my copy of the book is, I got a lot of underlines. And like I say, I started out with that bit about Chuck Yeager, and that's way deep in the book. But I think that the stuff that Dave highlighted earlier on in the book is very memorable. I mean, to me, that stuff right off the bat is like, that's the shit you should read every time you read this book. It's like the shut your pie hole cake face and pissing through a boner and like John Boat and Triple J. It's like, it's just so imaginative, inventive. Yeah. Like it doesn't really compare with anything else. And I think if anything, what I'm evidencing is like, it's hard to talk about a book that like is such its own thing.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I think that's a compliment. I take that as a compliment.
Oh, it is.
Thank you.
It is.
One of my other favorite things about this book is the metafictive qualities of it, where you, especially late in the novel, start to insert yourself, Adam Levin, a writer from Chicago, giving a reading at Shakespeare & Co. in Paris, accompanied by your wife, Camille Bordas, and you write your in-laws into the novel, and you say that like you were inspired by Belt's swing set murders to become a writer. There's all these like moments where you insert yourself into the text, and whenever a writer does that, they have me. I am just in it with them. Like Wallace does this in The Pale King in The Depressed Person. Paul Auster does this. Douglas Copeland, Vonnegut, Mikhail Holoback, Coover. Like so many great metafictive writers, postmodern writers do this. And it is just the most fun thing for me to see ever happen on a page. Like I think it's just magic, and I light up.
I'm glad you dig it, man.
Is it like, for you, is it a way of like immortalizing yourself even further? Like the concept of being published is immortalization. When you put yourself into the thing that's being published in that way, is that like a second way to secure that? I don't know.
I don't think so. I think it's really just a symptom of having read so much Kurt Vonnegut over and over when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Like it's really like all the sort of like I think I've probably said this too many times, but all the kind of impulses that I have to do weird shit on the page, like, or to do anything metafictive, that stuff is really I undermine. I'd say I get rid of 90% of that when I'm writing.
Oh wow!
Like it's like that's my first go is like I think was really, and I really think it goes to Vonnegut. Like there's this moment in Slaughterhouse-Five. I don't even remember what the line was, but the soldiers, the POWs are like they're pissing outside, and someone makes a wisecrack, and Vonnegut just goes,
"Through boners."
That was me. No. But Vonnegut, who hasn't appeared since the introduction to the book, says that was me. I'm the one who said that.
Oh, yeah,
and that's it. And then in Breakfast of Champions, he's very much in there.
Right.
And I think when I was a kid, when I was reading that stuff, because like Slaughterhouse-Five, I read religiously. Like I remember in 6th and 7th grade, I think I read that book 11 times, and I was addicted to it. And
that's young.
I just think that stuff thrilled me so much. Yeah, with Slaughterhouse 5, I feel like 11-year-olds should read it. I feel I think, I mean, I don't know, like they read these like epic vampire trash shit books, and like, and it's like Slaughterhouse 5 is like, first, it's called Slaughterhouse 5, man. What kid wouldn't want to read that?
Oh,
but
yeah,
like,
it's so visceral.
It's, you know, there's aliens, there's war, there's dick jokes. Like, it's great. Like, and you know, like, I didn't get it the first 3 times I read it, but I thought I did, and it was excellent.
I found the best way to get like 11, 12-year-olds to read anything is to be like, oh, no, that's too inappropriate for you. Give me that back.
Well, they can read that in 7 years.
And then
it's really funny you say that. Like, that's kind of how I ended up reading it. Like, I had like, no, this was in school. Like, I said, I wanted to do a book report on it. Like, where it was like, you know, you could do a book report, pick a book and do a book report on it. And I had this teacher, and I hated this teacher. I was not a good kid in school. And this teacher, she said no. And even looking back on it, I'm like, no, she was actually bad news too. But she said I couldn't read it. I couldn't do Slaughterhouse 5 because we were going to, as a class, read Fahrenheit 451 in a few weeks. And I told, and like, I remember my parents, I think who I got the sort of authority problem thing from, I was like, she told me I can't read this book. And they were like, fuck that, you read whatever book you want. And I was like, all right. And they bought me Slaughterhouse 5.
Cool parents.
You know, like, because I wanted it because it was called Slaughterhouse 5. Like, I didn't know anything about it.
It's a guaranteed way to get a kid to read a book.
Hell yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I just recently did that with a book for my older son. I gave him a book, and I'm not going to say what, but I was like, yeah, read a few pages of it. And I was like, oh, actually, give that back. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to give that to you. That's totally inappropriate. You can't read that. I'm going to hide it. And he was like, oh, shit, I got to read that now.
You find him at like 2 a.m.
Vonnegut is one of those ones
reading it or something. Sneaking
I can't wait. I hope so. I'm challenging him. I'm like going to ban him from it.
I actually just recommended Slaughterhouse 5 to a friend like 3 hours ago today. A good friend of mine back home who doesn't read much, and he's like, I'm bored at home. Like, he's such an extrovert. He's like, I got to read something. What do I read? I was like, all right, man.
Yeah, man.
Slaughterhouse 5 is really good.
There's a lot of shit going on in Timequake about pandemics, like at the end of the world. If you haven't, like,
I actually haven't read Timequake. I think I've read all of the novels up till Timequake, I think, except for
it's kind of not a great book. It's like an excuse for him to put a lot of his aphoristic shit into just like one big book.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, it is sort of like the end of the world, and there's a global pandemic, and it's totally worth reading. And I saw him read from it this is probably 1996 in Tattered Cover Denver, whenever it came out. 97, whenever that came out. It was the one time I got to see him. But even now, I think that book is super relevant, and like, I really hope that like my kids go through that phase of just wanting to devour every one of them. Because I think that like I would totally facilitate that. Like, if they came home and were like, oh, you know, I can't get Cat's Cradle at school anymore, I'd be like, well, fuck you. You're going to get Cat's Cradle right now.
No, that book, I was going to say, like, that, it was that, Slaughterhouse 5 and Breakfast of Champions that were, when I was a kid, they were, those three were unreal.
The Trinity.
Like, over and over.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Dave, any final thoughts from you, Dave?
Yeah, like, I still have so many questions, but we got to wrap this up to respect your time here, Adam.
Right.
I mean, like, I have questions about some of the theological stuff in the instructions to do with Judaism and like your upbringing. Matt kind of asked you that about that early, and I just wanted to mention that like how formative this was for me. This in the instructions was for me in thinking about myself as a goy, and in terms of goyishness. And I actually got a chance to live in Tel Aviv for 6 months in 2014.
Oh, wow.
My wife was doing some work for her master's there with a peace building organization, and you know, we did like day trips to Jerusalem all the time and stuff, and I just thought about the instructions like every day while I was there, because I'm a Gentile Canadian person, especially like when you go to places like the Wailing Wall and the Temple Mount, and like so the instructions was like always present in my thinking when I was living there, you know, just about like, here's who I am in this culture. And it was really kind of a cool exercise to get me thinking about like nationality and ethnic heritage and things like that. So,
cool.
I've got thoughts about
6 months in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, 6 months as well. It was actually 2 days after we got there is when the Israeli-Gaza conflict known as Operation Protective Edge started.
Oh, wow.
So rockets were coming into Tel Aviv, like 5 or 6 rockets a day, missile interceptions above the city. I was frantically Googling like flights to Greece to get us the hell out of there because I thought we were going to die. And then after like 4 days, it was like, oh, this is fine.
Stop.
The siren goes off.
Yeah.
You know, you look at each other in bed, roll back over, like the Iron Dome's got this, no worries. And it did miraculous. Like it was amazing. But yeah, it was a fascinating 6 months of my life for sure. One of the richest.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. I've got questions about. Okay, so I have to ask you about Jacob McGraw-Mickelson, who did the cover of the Instructions, because he is like my favorite artist, living or dead. And I have an original piece at home by him in Victoria, which is kind of a funny story. He sent it to me because I ordered a print and it took months, and I just checked in with him eventually. He was like, hey, is that coming? He's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's been 4 months. I'm sending you the original. And I was like, no, please don't. Like, that's too generous. He's like, too late. But how did that come about with him? What was your working relationship coming up with the cover for the Instructions?
Well, I had nothing direct with him, and I think it was him and his partner, Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel Sumter, power couple of the visual art world.
yeah, and so everything was sort of filtered through Eli Horowitz, my editor there,
right? Yeah.
And it was like he's brilliant. All those beautiful McSweeney's covers. That's like. You know, I mean, he didn't make them. He's not the artist. He's choosing them and sort of refining. And so, as I remember it, there were a couple other covers, and both of us were kind of like, and I don't even know if Jacob and Rachel had done them. They were nice images, but they weren't great for the book. And then I don't know, like Eli would talk to me. Eli's this amazing communicator, especially with this stuff, and I said something and he refined it and he said it to them, and then they just came back with what was what almost exactly what became the cover.
Cool.
And and it was like they did drafts. It was really cool, man. It was I was really happy. I was really happy with both the covers. In fact, I'm very happy with the Bubblegum cover. I mean, I've been very lucky in terms of book covers. Yeah. And I don't know if they told you, it's going to smell like bubble gum.
Oh, really?
Do you know this?
What? The galley doesn't.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
It's going to be scratch and sniff?
The galley doesn't. It's more like a heat and sniff, I guess.
Awesome.
Like, as far as I can tell, they sent me one thing a few months ago, and it was like, if you it's just the jacket. It's not the casing.
Right.
But the jacket, it's like if you hold the jacket in your hand for a second, it becomes redolent of bubblegum. Like it's
right.
And I think if it's just sitting there, it doesn't. But I'm not sure. I have a weak nose. I'm a heavy smoker.
But we got that impression from this book.
Yeah.
You're mentioned as having smoked only more than Belt Magnet. Adam Levin, author of the Instructions, maybe is like one of the only living people on Earth who smokes more than Belt Magnet or something like that.
Yeah. Not anymore, but I did at one point.
Oh, yeah. I guess for a final thought, Matt, it would be to say that for Wallace fans who are coming to this book, I found a lot of Wallacean resonance throughout it, and I think a lot of it was like really beautiful homage. And I actually have like a 13-point questionnaire for you here, which I think we're probably out of time for, but it's like, is this a direct Wallace reference that's intentional? Confirm, deny, or plead the fifth on this?
All right, give it to me.
Do you want it? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Clyde reminds me so much of James Incandenza's father. Like the early scenes in the 1960s scenes in Arizona in the garage, where he's drinking slowly and getting drunker,
totally.
and he's provoking his manhood at every turn.
And he's complaining about method actors.
Yes. Was there some kind of resonance between them and then the relationship between Belt and his dad there? Because I felt like there was
now that you say that, I'm like, oh, that's interesting, but I'm going to go with deny. Definitely not deliberate.
Okay, good. All right, number 2. On page 31, there's a coded timeline set in 2013. It kind of reminds me of that page, I think 231 in Infinite Jest, where he finally gives you the timeline of subsidized time years. Confirm or deny.
What page, Dave? I'm sorry. What I didn't have my Bible open here.
Page 31.
31.
31. Okay.
There's something of a coded timeline where you can start to sort of piece.
Deny.
You kind of have to piece it out a bit, but you can sort of figure out what the timeline is. Yeah.
Oh, I had one like this. Let me interrupt right quick and say, what about Nurse Clyde in the instructions versus Clyde Belt here?
Honestly, I haven't read the instructions since I published the instructions, and I forgot that Nurse Clyde existed in the instructions. I forgot Nurse Clyde's name.
Enough, I'll take it.
Yes, yeah. I
I'll
love the name
take
Clyde.
It. Just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, nice. Point 3, I already sort of mentioned the swearing parrot belonging to Sally the Balls, akin to Vlad from Broom of the System.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly read Broom of the System a long time ago. It's possible, but I'm going to go deny.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I appreciate that, like, a lot of this is
You named some other ones. You asked me about this earlier, and I was like, you actually hit a couple. So I'm not going to go deny all the way through, I don't think.
All right, here's a good one. Page 147, Lotta Hogg describes eating pizza, turning it into pure energy so that she may continue to grow her body and repeat the process many, many more times. This reminded me so much of the Norman Bombardini scene from Broom of the System, where he's eating 9 steaks so that he can grow to infinite size and consume the universe.
That in itself is sort of an allusion to the Monty Python thing.
Yeah, that too. Also,
to meaning of life,
one mint
right?
waffle.
The barfing.
Yeah.
One mint waffle.
Yeah. Deny.
Yeah, nice. All right. On page 159 and 160, no, please don't offers comfort, makes him feel understood. And I know a lot of people have said this about Infinite Jest, this idea that, fiction makes us less lonely is something that Wallace seemed to say quite a bit. Now, we've already covered sort of the empathy territory with you. There was a firm deny there, so I assume that's going to be kind of similar. But do you think fiction, does it do that for you a little bit?
I think a lot about Wallace, the person who discussed his work, versus, I shouldn't say a lot, but as I mentioned earlier, I wish I didn't have to, but I read stuff about him and what he says about his work and some of the sort of the This Is Water stuff. Yeah. And I kind of try to pretend it doesn't exist.
Like it kind of
because I think it actually it doesn't ruin it. I just think it actually is. I think describing one's novel is always, hopefully, if the novel's any good, is significantly less accurate than the novel describing itself, if that makes sense. And so
that's a fair point.
I think I kind of don't like the idea of a statement about what one's fiction does or is supposed to do that's definitive. And so I think I was maybe I was making a little joke. Let's call it let's say I plead the fifth, even though I'm not trying to hide. I just nice. I can't quite remember where my head was at. Right?
Yeah. I'm sure, like, if a novel takes you 7 years, it's hard to pinpoint all these particular moments like that, right?
Yeah.
All right. Point 6, page 192. There is a mention of the brief interview. Of course, Wallace had brief interviews with hideous men.
Well, I certainly know brief interviews.
Specific reference or just pure coincidence?
Well, I'm looking at it in Bubblegum. I can't see it in Bubblegum. Hold on. 192, you say. Brief interview. I'm guessing it's a deny because I don't even remember this.
All right.
Deny.
Okay. Cool. Number 7. There's on page 296. There's a letter from the mom with a perfect description of Belt having Wallace's writing style, which is the voice in which I think when my thinking's most complex and deliberate. Your style is infectious, contagious. After a couple hours of reading your journals, I found I just couldn't help but rip them off. And I know that a lot of people describe Wallace's writing as that, like capturing that perfect brain voice, except for just in like a way more articulate kind of form. I feel that your writing has a very similarly addictive property with like the slang stuff and the cadence and things like that. Was that something?
Plead the fifth.
Okay. Nice. There's an excellent number 8. There's a filmography from one of the characters. It reminded me a little bit of like the James Incandenza filmography endnote in Infinite Jest. Was there a bit of resonance there for you there?
There's a filmography? Where's the filmography?
Well, the section that just describes all the films, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, certainly. I mean, I wouldn't say that's that's not a nod so much as I loved that part in Infinite Jest, and I've thought about that for years. So I would say, yeah, I'm not going to even go plead the fifth. I'm going to go somewhere between, plead the fifth and confirm. Like yeah. Yeah, cool. I love that. That was one of the great thrills of reading that book the first time.
Oh yeah, so funny.
Was getting involved in that filmography, in that fictional filmography. So yeah.
One of my great friends in Vancouver right now is reading. He's trying to read Infinite Jest for the fourth time now. I think he got to page 500 at one point. Quit, couldn't do it. He just texted me the other day that he finished the filmography, and he's like, oh yeah, I remember that part. That was really good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna pare down my list to one last one because it's getting late for you guys. On page
it is. Well,
395, there's what appears to be an English teacher or creative writing teacher talking to their class, and they're neurotic about grammar, and it pretty strongly seemed to me like David Foster Wallace was the character in that scene. That's a confirm.
Full confirm.
Awesome.
Confirm.
I love that section so much. I thought about reading it for my selection. But I didn't want to give too much specifically away. But I'm
really glad you recognize it. That makes me happy. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I just think that people who listen to this show are gonna find a lot of joy in Bubblegum, with some of this Wallace Resonance stuff specifically, but in all of the other myriad aspects that we've talked about that make Bubblegum such a fun and poignant and evocative ride. So we just want to. Again, thank you so much, Adam, for talking to us about your new book and your older books. And it is honestly like the thrill of a podcaster's lifetime to have you on a literary show like this to talk about your work. So thanks for staying up late.
You're nice.
And being with us.
It was a pleasure. It was really great talking to you guys. Thank you so much.
Cool. Just by way of a final wrap up, in these sort of COVID times we're living in, Adam, do you have any strong book recommendations, things you've read lately that have been sort of taking you out of
music or film,
any pop culture stuff that people should check out?
Well, I mean, like I said, I'm reading Executioner's Song right now for the first time. Mm-hmm. Have you guys read this?
No.
Norman Mailer,
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. It's fucking unbelievable. I mean, it's unlike all the other Mailer stuff I've read, which I don't particularly dislike, but I've never sort of been that floored by Mailer, and this is killing me, man. This is I go out and I miss it. I'm I can't wait to get home and read it, and it sort of keeps on giving. I'm 2/3 in. It's a 1,100 page book, and it's unreal.
Amazing.
But I think
I read that book way too soon. I read that book when I was 17, 18 years old.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
I will say if the archive, if you want to come see the original drafts of it, they're here in Austin, the Ransom Center.
No shit.
Mailer's archive. Yeah.
It's wild. It's such a wild book. But yeah, I mean, I think I wrote something for some website thing that's going to go up, I think, this week. Just a very short thing, but I think Franny and Zooey is always extremely chilling out to me. It's I love that book, and I think that just it's borne up under a zillion rereads, and so I'm thinking, I'm maybe next week, maybe I'll be done with the Mailer, I'll try to read something else, and I'll go there. I don't know, man. I mean, there's so many books, there's...
That's the thing.
Even just recently, I mean, there's I've read a lot of good books lately. The last Jesse Ball book is unreal. Diver's Game. You guys are familiar with Tabordo, right? With Christian.
Oh yeah. We read Tough
We talked about him
recently.
with Kyle.
Kyle Beachy.
Yeah. Christian's one of my favorite writers. And his new collection, I think, is the
Tough
best
Loma
thing
is a
written.
wild ride. I loved it.
Yeah. Oh, but did you read Ghost Engine? The new thing?
Ghost Engine, the short stories.
Yeah.
I've not got my hands on it yet, but you mentioned it recently, and I put it on my top of my to read list.
So good. And then the other one was have you guys read Adam Ehrlich Sachs?
No. have not.
Oh, you'd love this guy, man. You could find a couple of his stories online. So he has a collection of stories, but then he has this novel that got like criminally too little press last year, called The Organs of Sense, which is insane. It's like if Bernhard were actually like 100 times funnier than Bernhard already is, and it's the premise is like it's the worst idea for a book ever, and it's so just rock star pulled off every step of the way. It's that Leibniz, before he really becomes Leibniz, goes looking for this astronomer who claims to have charted all the stars in the sky and who's blind, and then he finds him. The astronomer tells him this epic story. And that's the book. That sounds rad. I'm down. It's definitely so good. It'll blow your mind. It's so good. Like hurt yourself laughing good.
Okay, great.
So yeah.
But we'll put a link in the show notes to your book, and where people can go and pick that up. And we'll put a link to your website, which has some great reviews of the book.
Adam Levin, AdamLevin.com.
Adam Levin. I can kind of relate to that nomenclature as I own bolano.com. But you can't really do the tilde in the fucking URL. So
are you a big Bolano fan?
A bit.
Matt is.
I actually am, but like to the point, this is a long time ago of like, doing massive deep reads into Savage Detectives in 2666. But I just that duplicating the name. Like, that was like my shit. So I totally relate.
That's fun. But by the way, actually, in terms of books for COVID, I just reread Savage Detectives last summer. And the first time I'd read it.
Fucking great book.
Yeah, I hated it the first time. I hated it. I'd read 2666 and I thought it was the most amazing thing I'd read in years.
Yeah,
and then I got Savage Detectives and I was so disappointed. And and everyone was telling me I was crazy. And I was like, you're crazy. It's about fucking poets. Who cares? And I don't know what happened. We were in Spain last summer and I just read the book in like 4 days. Like on this, like I didn't even go to the beach. Like the beach was across like the border. Like we were at an apartment in the south of Spain. It's a really cheap area of Spain, where actually they're supposed to be in Bubblegum, and
that's where he lived.
And I could look outside and there's the sea, and I did not go. I just read Savage Detectives. Like it was like I was like, how did I miss this? Like I read the whole book the first time, and I just didn't like it. And this time I was like, this is an amazing book.
Great joy.
But that I think would be a great coronavirus read.
Okay.
Anyways, totally.
Matt, you and I are both reading Duck's Newburyport right now by Lucy Ellman.
How is that?
Oh, it's great. I am
phenomenal.
loving it.
It's really great.
Yeah. I'm about 130
recommend that book.
pages in right now.
But listen, Dave, I tell Dave this, and I have a strong belief that like if you go to, and this is for anyone listening, if you've ever been to like a literary reading where you're going to an author's reading at a bookstore and they're reading from their new book, just pretend that all other books don't exist. Just focus on that one fucking book, like for an hour or 2 hours, however long it takes.
Yeah.
Just don't fucking acknowledge any other book even existing. And so like part of me is like, let's just edit all this out. All I want to talk about is Bubblegum. I don't want to pretend that like nothing else exists. Like don't ever learn from my mistakes. Don't talk about any other. If you're talking with an author who's just published an amazing book, that's it. That's all that exists. That's the world.
Yeah.
That's my world. So like I could go at least another like 2 hours in this book easily. Like there's whole characters we haven't even brought up. There's whole like plot lines we haven't even brought up. I feel like we just scratched the surface, and it's been like 2 freaking hours of talking with you, and like what an honor. But like no other books, Dave.
Yeah, okay.
Ducks Newburyport. Never heard of it. Never heard of it.
Yeah, I'm
We're done. Matt is
Bubblegum
out.
for the
He's
seventh
out.
time right now.
No, I'm not out. I'm just like I'm out on every other thing except Bubblegum. I'm gonna go read the Chuck Yeager thing next.
Oh yeah,
I appreciate
that part
it,
is amazing. Well, all right, let's wrap it up then. We want to thank a brand new patron, Richard Blackwell. Thanks, Richard, so much for your support. As usual, we want to thank Robin O'Neill for her amazing art that she's contributed to our show. And when I said that Jacob McGraw is my favorite living artist, Robin is equally right there as well. Check her stuff out if you haven't lately. She's doing rad stuff all the time. We want to thank the band Parquet Courts for their song Instant Disassembly. And I really want to give a special thank you to Robert Bloom, who's your editor at Doubleday, Adam, who sent us a really sweet letter along with the galley review copies of your book, and was so much fun to correspond with him as we were setting all this up over the last few months.
Great guy.
Yeah, he seems rad. And a big thanks, too, to episode 45 guest Kyle Beachy, who put us in touch with you in the first place, Adam, and really made this whole episode possible. So, Kyle, thank you so much for that, man. Thank you again, Adam. If you want to get in touch with us, Matt, where can people find us?
We're concavityshow@gmail.com. We really like it when people email us. We get a lot of great emails, and I really look forward to those. I would love it if people send us emails all the time. Concavity Show on Instagram, Concavity Show at Concavity Show on Twitter, Facebook apparently. I don't know where else, Dave.
Yeah, you nailed it. All the things.
All right.
Awesome.
All right. Once again, Adam, thank you so much.
Yeah, no kidding.
Thanks, guys.
And we're wishing everyone good health in these very uncanny Gothic times. Take care of yourselves and each other.
Amen.
Catch me now as I say, into darkness I thought to be extinct.
You would be like, oh shit, how are we going to make this to an hour? But every time, man, it's surprising of how quickly it goes by.
Right on.
And
the time
you don't actually have to wrap it up at that point. But that's usually just our signal to each other that someone is even paying attention to the fucking clock. And
right on.